So you guys have probably heard this in a lot of your classes, but this is really connecting and how do you set your objectives and what do you do? And really it's kind of that framework using SMART, right? And you've heard this, hopefully you have heard this a lot before. SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely, and really applying that to any of the objectives you set really makes your objectives much, much better, okay? And this just shows you some examples, but this is really make sure that your objectives are following this SMART framework. So this is just another take of something that you guys have seen before. I've showed you in a previous video, but it really looks at the traditional purchase funnel, awareness, consideration, preference, purchase, loyalty on one side, and it looks at like today in terms of how there's added complexity, and that added complexity, I really want to point out, that creates measurement challenge in and of itself, right? It used to be kind of like how we describe it is more linear, but with all these added touch points and tools and techniques and tactics that we have available as marketers, it makes that cause and effect relationship a lot more difficult to show and prove in terms of where is the attribution. Is it because that you saw the TV ad? Is it because you saw the online? Where was the touch point interaction that actually had impact in terms of the purchase decision? So how can we draw that relationship? So it's much harder now than it was, but it still is achievable. So even though it's achievable, in terms of from that measurement and our ability to show that impact, it's difficult. You can see here is these percentages are really low in terms of linking kind of the outcome. So in our ability to show value, our ability to use data analytics to make recommendations. And so most people that responded in this survey, don't have great confidence in our ability to do that. And so that's a challenge, and hopefully that over time that these metrics can improve, and that will create more impact that we can prove from a marketing strategy and tactics standpoint. One area that really is like evident that kind of the amount of money that we're spending and are we getting return on that is really on the research side, right? So it doesn't really make sense that we are very sophisticated supposedly and we can do a great job as creating consumer insights and doing research, and you have to do it. It makes you have a more educated and informed decision. But if you look at the outcome in terms of, say, for instance, on new product introductions, 95% of them fail to reach their return on investment targets. Well, so is that the cause, or is that the problem that our research isn't good? Yeah, I don't know, maybe partially, but you're not going to be 100% predictive in terms of the research you do. But it does create another challenge that we have in perception in marketing is that failure rate links back, and where does the blame fall, right? If that's such a high failure rate. So here's another disconnect, and this one is actually kind of one of my favorites, and it's a problem inside the mini organizations, right? And so there's the disconnect between what's happening on the ground in terms of from an employee standpoint, and then what senior management and leadership has. There's a lot of times a big disconnect. And a lot of times metrics, or the inability to use the right metrics or tell the right story, creates this huge disconnect. So in this survey, that was a Bain survey, 80% of CEOs believe that their brand provides a superior customer experience. The big problem with that is, like, if you talk to the customer, which is the only one that matters, only 8% of those customers agree. So imagine the disconnect in the decision that the CEO is going to make if they think that, like, no, we're awesome, our brand is like having an awesome experience. Well, what are you going to do in terms of your spend allocation and decision that you're probably going to limit that and squish down the spend? Well, but if you look at what the customers, that there's obviously a problem there, and customers aren't having a great experience or a good experience. And so that level of disconnect and that use of metrics is like probably one of the biggest problems in terms of it actually leads to an underinvestment in things that you probably should invest in to create long-term success for your company. So at the end of the day, because of these challenges, marketers need to hold themselves accountable, and they need to become more accountable as a functional element to make the business stronger and make the business better. And really that ties to the ability to measure and actually provide proof, right? So some of the negativity we've talked about in marketing is really tied where, if you look at marketing and some things that are measured now, it's like a lot of marketing campaigns or marketing spends, there's negative ROI associated with them, or they don't know. And probably the bigger issue is they don't know what the ROI is. They can't calculate it, right? Or a lot of times, you've seen like some of the failure rates in terms of marketing tactical executions are sometimes really low. And so because of that actually puts more pressure on marketing, but it also like increases the need to create these attribution models or this proof that the return on marketing investment, that we can provide a strong linkage and actually prove that what we're doing. from an internal standpoint, for us, from our function, what it also does, if we are able to do that, it gives us huge improvement opportunities that we can fix and change things, especially of real-time data, and improve kind of a campaign on the fly that will actually result in better return over the long term. So it's kind of really both, right? It's kind of the after effect in terms of the historical backward looking, like how did we do, but also if we have good data real time, that lets us like improve things on the fly, and that's going to provide better results on the long term as well. So we've talked a lot about this in terms of like marketing and return on marketing investment is a challenge. You know, this list looks at some of the other challenges that marketers face, and you know, pretty makes sense that, right, differentiation from competition is number one, but really third on the list is this measure return on our marketing efforts. It's a challenge, it's difficult, and it's really not like the fun part necessarily for most people, but it really is the kind of a critical part that we need to address, because that's going to allow us to achieve the other objectives better, faster, and more effectively. So really the firms that do invest and have better marketing measurement from a campaign or a tactical marketing standpoint, they're really better performers, right? They have higher sales growth, better brand equity, et cetera. And so really you want to look at kind of the simple model in terms of actually measuring. It's really shown here in terms of invest in a specific campaign or tactic, if you will, manage that, and make sure you're capturing and measuring that specific campaign. And then you want to have this feedback loop. And so one of the consistent elements across performance measurement systems is this feedback loop that lets you improve, it lets you change, it lets you get better over time, and lets you decide, okay, should we spend our money here or should we not spend our money there? And so that's kind of the critical element in terms of budget decisions or which tactics we're going to employ to actually create value and provide value for our customers. If you want to look at just general categories, and I'm going to just kind of show you this, is these are typically the metrics that are responsibility of marketers, and it's probably more inclusive than you would have thought if you haven't been familiar or you haven't been involved in marketing measurement. But let's just take a look at some of these real quick. Again, just another thing I wanted to show you, and probably not a surprise to you, but this really shows from another research study in terms of what are the most widely used metrics that marketers use, and you know, again, probably not a surprise that market share is on the top at number one. So even I showed you some of the most widely used metrics. Really, the question becomes, you know, what metrics matter, and this really is situational to your category, your company, your situation. It's really specific to a particular industry even. And so one of the things that you want to really look at is and understand is you know, some metrics, yeah, it might be great to gather and have that data, but do they ultimately matter? And so this is something that you need to figure out in terms of what are the specific metrics associated with different tactics, and then how does that, and what are the key performance indicators that are going to actually drive or help me make the strategic decisions that are going to drive my business going forward. So in defining your objectives, or really understanding and setting up your performance measurement system, it always makes sense to ask, and you've heard me say this before, but ask the simple questions, right? And the simple questions can lead you to kind of what's really going on in your business, and then link you to maybe your key objectives that will actually link to what are the strategic measurements that tie back to those objectives or metrics, right? So this is just a list of some of the questions that you might want to ask that will help you really frame that in your mind in terms of what are some of the potential objectives and then measurement connections to those objectives. Okay, you can categorize your metrics a lot of different ways and like help you decide, and it really could bucket into different types of objectives you might have. And this is just one way you can take a look at it. A lot of times, and a lot of effort is being placed now in terms of attribution, and attribution is really the interaction and correlation component, as you can see on the bottom. When we do X, what happens with Y, right? Everyone wants to know that. If we spend on this, what's going to happen? So that's really one that's probably that a lot of companies are emphasizing now, but there's, you know, many other ones that you might want to take a look at. You know, another way to get at what metrics matter, it's really tied to kind of those simple questions. So like, you know, we as marketers, to be able to make the strategic decisions, the right ones, we ask ourselves like, okay, are we getting our message out? Well, how do we figure that out, right? So there's metrics that could help tell us, are we getting our message out? You know, you could take a look at total impressions. You could look at and test people on what their ad recall was, right? So things that are going to give you directional information in terms of, are we communicating value appropriately to the right customer? What is that message? So this is, you know, that simple question, are we getting our message out, could create a list of metrics that might make sense that you want to include in your performance measurement system. Another question that we want to ask in this regards to our own properties in terms of some of our content marketing, et cetera, is, like look at our website, or, in this case, it's really tied to a website. It's like, who's coming to our site? How often? How long time are they spending on our site? Are they unique? Are they the same people, right? It might tie into our social media strategy in terms of a number of fans, number of followers, right? Are we engaging with those consumers? Again, taking a look at like how are our properties, our own properties, our owned properties performing, right? So these are just some metrics that give us insight and give us some information on that, on exactly that. So another simple question, right? Are our target customers aware of us? Well, how do you figure that out? Well, one of the things that you can do is look at aided or unaided awareness, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you want to look at, there's some other tools that you have in terms of share of voice, sentiment, and that's really a social media measurement that you want to take a look at. But some of the other ones that really are popular now are the kind of search metrics, especially in digital marketing, is the organic search volume, like how many people are searching for our products, our services, our category, our keywords, etc. That's another metric that tells you, like, are our target customers, do they know about us? Do they connect with us, et cetera? And that's a key question that you won't need or have to answer to make sure that you understand kind of like how we're performing from a marketing standpoint. Another question that you need to ask is really, how are our customers likely to buy from us, right? So you can measure, are they considering us? You can measure purchase intent. These are things that you can measure. Are people signing up for our loyalty program? And so these are all things that you can actually have different tactical things depending on how you're scoring or performing on these different categories, right? So another one I just want to point out really quickly right here is Net Promoter Score. So Net Promoter Score is really how likely you're going to, or how likely are you to recommend a product or service on a scale. And we're going to talk more about that. I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on Net Promoter Score. Okay, so after our customers buy, they have, it's kind of that post-purchase behavior. Question becomes, okay, are our customers going to recommend us? Well, we can really get some measurement or insight in terms of that kind of the likelihood to buy. We can really look at the post in terms of our customer satisfaction ratings, and all of you have experienced that. Net sentiment, Net Promoter Score, average ratings, and average ratings means kind of like when you go onto a website and you do a review, do you give it 4 stars, do you give it 5 stars, whatever. So again, these are indicators in terms of our connection back to our customer on how happy we are with that our customers are with our products, right? So average ratings is an interesting one. So like, what do you do? Like, this gets back to like the question that we've done in all of our cases throughout the year in terms of like, our sales are going down, like what do we do? Well, you need to understand, well, what are potentially the causes, and metrics are going to lead you there and get you to what those causes might be. So one of the things that what happens if your average rankings out of 5 stars, if you're seeing 1 star, 1 star, 1 star, well, you better make sure that you're addressing that and understanding what that is and getting to the root cause of why that is and getting that number up, or you're not going to be in business very long, right? So some of these are really key, important things that companies need to pay attention to. This just an FYI slide, but it's really like looking at some classic marketing metrics and really tying them into categories, but just want you to just take a look at some of these and like, maybe think to yourself, like, are these measures that our company is using? Is it measures that I'm aware of? And we can talk more about this in discussions in terms of like metrics that are currently being used in popular metrics. Okay, so this slide basically shows some newer marketing metrics that are really tied to some of the digital strategies. But as marketing and the tactics have evolved and we've moved more towards digital, different metrics are going to drive results, right? Or different metrics are going to give you indication on results. Say it that way, that's better.